Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the webinar on the peatland management in Thailand. So people are still admitting to the room. We will start very soon. Yeah, good morning. My name is Satya Budi Utama, or you can just call me Tommy. On behalf of People for Peat Coalition, it is my pleasure to welcome you today to the webinar on the Thailand peatland management. This webinar is organized within the framework of the sustainable use of peatland and haze mitigation in ASEAN, or as we call it, the SUPA program. The SUPA is an ASEAN-wide initiative supported by the European Union, designed to sustain ASEAN's endeavors in combating transboundary haze pollution and peatland fires in the region. I wish to extend also a warm welcome to our colleagues from other peatland programs and initiatives across ASEAN, and also a representative from the Environment Divisions of the ASEAN Secretariat in Jakarta. We are happy here to have Ms. Jenny Lundmark of the European Union delegation to Thailand with us today. Before moving to our sessions, I wish to invite Ms. Lundmark to deliver an opening remark for our webinar. Ms. Lundmark, you may have now the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Satya. Nice to see you again today. My fellow speakers and dear participants in this webinar, I'm very happy to see you again today. Some of you, I think today, some of you are hopefully newcomers to this more public webinar to discuss peatlands in Thailand. The European Union is proud to support this initiative, and I want to thank you for inviting me to open the webinar today. As already mentioned by Satya, the overall objective of this sustainable use of peatlands and haze mitigation in ASEAN project is to promote exactly that, the sustainable management of peatlands in ASEAN, through collective actions to enhance cooperation and support and sustain local livelihoods, which I think is one of the things that we will be discussing today, along with also reducing the risk of fire and associated haze. An issue that I at least learned yesterday kills about 100,000 people in Southeast Asia every year, which is an enormous amount of people, I have to say, and I was a bit surprised by that. So it only emphasizes the importance of the subject. I think peatlands, we also learned, I have learned in the last 2 days, is one of the most efficient natural carbon sinks on the planet. You probably all knew this already. They cover only about 3% of the global land area, but they hold 30% of the oil's natural organic carbon. They function like our lungs in some ways. If left undisturbed, they inhale the carbon dioxide more than any other vegetation type on the earth combined. But when they are drained or deforested, they exhale and they release about 6% of global carbon dioxide each year. With this in mind, I think one of the main arguments from our side when we talk about sustainable management of peatlands is really to discuss the value that we could get by simply leaving them alone. It's a unique ecosystem which can also preserve water supplies, regulate and reduce flood damage. It provides timber, fish, and other resources for local communities and regulate the release of greenhouse gases. On top, of course, of not least hosting some of the most endangered species of flora and fauna on the planet. Despite of this, according to Wetlands International, peatlands in Southeast Asia are among the most threatened of our forests and wetlands. Vast areas of peat swamp have been cleared, burned, and drained for economic development, and few peatland remain intact. I think this was also something that I at least discovered yesterday, for instance, in Thailand. The numbers that I saw when preparing for this seminar was around 65,000 hectares of peatlands. But I learned yesterday that now a more maybe realistic number is down to 45,000 hectares of peatlands in Thailand. The European Union, and not least the European Union member states, have a long experience in the management of peatlands, because we do actually also have some of these in Europe. We both have good and bad experience, but we have learned the hard way, I think, that the loss of environmental services cost more than the short-term financial benefits gained. In Germany, in northern Germany, 10% of the drained peatlands was restored, and we avoided damages for what we estimate is close to 22 million euros annually from CO2 emissions. Under this program, which is implemented by the People for Peat coalition, we strongly urge to push the narrative on peatlands beyond that of being a place for cash crops. I think the COVID-19 crisis have taught us that our economies and our way of life should be based on diversity and respect for our natural resources. We need to place more value on the environment in its natural state. And that is one of the keys, I should say, to achieve sustainable management of peatlands. Transforming the way we look at peatlands is hard, especially when there are major economic interests at play and major economic operators depending on it. But the time, I think, is right to have a deeper discussion on this, maybe a more nuanced discussion on this, because we are at this critical juncture where we are more open to adaptive and transformative policy changes. And I think there is a window of opportunity to discuss this with governments. We are looking at this new circular economy model where we are less dependent upon natural resource exploitation and are more dependent on other things. And I think civil society plays a big role here to ensure the continued accountability and transparency of governments in this discussion going forward. We do hope that the non-state actors, many present here today, will be at the forefront of this dialogue and will continue a steadfast role in monitoring the private sector and government actors' commitments and their compliance levels towards sustainable management of peatlands and practices of peatlands management as well. We need to do more. I think we all realize this, to tackle the root causes of the peatland forest fires. And I really look forward to hearing from you today some ideas on how this could possibly be done. We all know this is a long journey. Unfortunately, we're running short of time. But we need to get the discussion started, and maybe also very quickly activities, not least in Thailand, where we still face fundamental gaps in our knowledge on peatlands. I think the project would do as much as possible, but to go forward, we really depend on also the very strong involvement of all of you, of civil society in Thailand, of the government of Thailand, to engage and steer the national narrative on peatlands, emphasizing the importance to protect and conserve peatland areas that are so rich, not only in terms of biodiversity, but also as a carbon storage place, wetland, I should say. In Thailand, it's a wetland. Thank you very much, and I look forward to following discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jenny Lundmark, for your opening remarks for our webinar. Back to the agenda. So today we'll have two speakers delivering their presentations on the peatland management in Thailand. But before we move to the first sessions, allow me also to bring a bit of context or introductions about the People for Peat and the SUPA component 2 program. So the coalition people for Peat or the PFP coalition is consisting of 3 organizations. The first one is being the World Resources Institute or WRI Indonesia. WRI Indonesia is an independent research organization dedicated to contributing to the socio-economic development in an inclusive and sustainable way. WRI Indonesia work is focused on environment, economic opportunity, and human well-being. The organization is based in Jakarta, Indonesia. The next members of the coalitions is the IDS Foundations, which brings together government, private sectors, CSOs, and financial institutions on the spirit of law and entrepreneurship, in working together to create solutions on global sustainability at scale. IDS Foundation is also based in Jakarta, Indonesia. Last but not least, we have Tropical Rainforest Conservation and Research Center, or TRCRC, which is based in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. TRCRC strives to conserve tropical rainforest plant species and lead landscape-wide protections and reforestation project. A bit of quantitative information about the Peat, just to add to what has been mentioned by Jenny in the remarks. So Southeast Asia is hosting 56% of the world's tropical peatland, which amounting to approximately 24 million hectares of peatland across the region. And we understand there are critical functions of peatland, as it is the largest natural terrestrial carbon store, and also it plays a critical ecosystem for our biodiversity, and peatlands also important in terms of regulating water resources, preventing floods and droughts. Unfortunately, consequences of unsustainable peatland management that is still occurring at the moment are draining and burning peatlands, which turn it from a carbon store into a carbon emitter. And as a result, transboundary haze in ASEAN region is an annual occurrence, which is contributing also to the climate crisis. A bit of maps on the coverage of the peatlands in the ASEAN region. So actually, within the framework of the SUPA Component 2 program, we are working on the 8 ASEAN countries, excluding Singapore and Brunei Darussalam. Another quick facts about the peatlands. So in 2015, peat fires in Indonesia, it cost more than 16.1 billion US dollars in economic loss alone for 2015 peat fires in Indonesia. And 77% of carbon in tropical peatlands is stored in Southeast Asia. 10% of global fossil fuel carbon emissions are coming from burned peatlands, and 42% of all soil carbon is stored in peat, which is only covering 3% of Earth's land area. In relation to the occurrence of the peat fires and other unsustainable practices of peatland in ASEAN, the SUPA Component 2 identified the 3 main challenges in the sustainable peatland management. The first one being the lack of reliable data and information on the sustainable management of the peatland. The second are the limited options for sustainable business solutions, and related to that is the limited access to funding in peatland areas. And there is also challenges around the lack of awareness and capacity. And those challenges are translated into the 3 pillars of our program. The first one being the pillars on the data information. So the activities around this first pillar is focusing mainly on establishing an inventory or database on the knowledge and gap related to the policy, practices, regulations framework, and also knowledge on the peatland management across the ASEAN countries. The second pillar related to the business investment is focusing on the livelihood aspect of the community living around the peatland areas. So the activities involves the establishments of a business hub and also to test case some of the business initiatives in the areas. The third pillar is working on the outreach and advocacy, focusing more on the activities to establish local narratives and engagement events to promote the sustainable ways of land management. We are working with mainly on non-state actors. Those stakeholders within the non-state actors are not limited, but focusing more on the village level communities, unions of farmers and smallholders, universities, research centers, civil society organizations, private sector or supply chain companies, and also banks and financial institutions. Today we're going to discuss specifically about the situations in Thailand. So the threats or the challenges related to the current management or the current peatland management in Thailand are lack of basic information and knowledge about the peatland, the current occurrence of forest fire, conflict of interest in the utilizations of peatlands, difficulty in restorations, acidic and low nutrition soil, illegal felling of trees, and also the drainage of the peatlands in Thailand. Yeah, I hope you will be enjoying this quick clip for the super component 2. That concludes brief introductions about the People for Peat and the Super Component 2 program. So moving on to our main agenda, I'm inviting Dr. Jo Kien Lee to facilitate our discussions. Dr. Jo, you may now have the floor.
Thank you, Tommy. Sawadee-ka. So very good day to everybody. Thank you, Ms. Jenny Lundmark, for your welcome address. I think that very well encapsulates the current state and also the perspectives of peatlands in our region. So I hope all of you are ready for today. We're going to have two talks by two very distinguished speakers. My name is Joe. So I'm the lead analyst for TRCRC, Tropical Rainforest Conservation and Research Center, and we are a part of People for Peat. So let's move to the next slide, please. This is our first speaker for today. Before we get into that, I just want to remind everyone and also let everyone know that the chat box function at the bottom is actually going to be very useful to you. It's going to be a friend of yours. So if you have any questions for any one of our speakers at any time, feel free to write it in there. There will also be a discussion session at the end if you would like to voice out your comments. But seeing that there'll be two talks, it would be good if you write down your thoughts and write down your comments or questions in the chat box so that we can address them later at the end. So for the first speaker for today, we have Mr. Ronakon Firaganon. I hope I pronounced your name well, forgive me if I didn't, who is a Senior Strategic Advisor for the Center for People and Forest, or RECOF. Mr. Piraganon has been working in the community-based natural resource management sector since the 1980s. He has extensive experience in promoting local people's knowledge and customary rights to ensure sustainable natural resource management and fair distribution of benefits through participatory approaches. With his professional background in appreciative inquiry for organizational development, participatory processes, forestry extension, participatory and experiential learning, and community-based climate change adaptation and mitigation, Mr. Sriraganon is one of the most experienced facilitators in his subjects in the Asia and the Pacific region. He has built capacity for a number of community forestry practitioners at various levels of government and civil society in different parts of the world. He has vast experience developing diverse and innovative capacity development programs for community-based natural resource management and integrated landscape management in several projects in South, Central, and Southeast Asia, Pacific, and Eastern Africa. So the title of this talk today will be Community Engagement in Peat Fires Management. So without further ado, Mr. Ranakon, if you're ready, the floor is yours. You have 20 minutes.
All right, perfect. Thanks a lot, Joe, and thanks a lot for Super Coalition member to invite Raykov to be part of the discussion today. Should I share the screen or somebody help to share the screen?
We can do it on your behalf.
So what is your prefer? Should I share or somebody will
I
do?
think you can share if you want to, or we can do it as well.
All right. Okay, let me share the screen, then it will be easy for me to manage. Can you see the screen?
Yes, we can.
All right, perfect. Okay. Well, as I said, this is very nice opportunity to share the experience that how Raykov worked together on the peat fire management. And I would say that okay, even the title of this super component 2, talking about the people for peat, but then probably my discussion in this particular session, we focus more on the peat for people. So rather than talking about people for peat, but I would like to re-emphasize on the local community engagement in the peat fire management. So just give you some kind of a snapshot, perhaps, what this is about the areas that we are working. Okay. Well, the area we are working is called Kwan Kreng. It's a kind of a mix between peat and other land use, but the total area of the landscape, which is about like 74,000 hectares. Within this area, a number of people living in the areas, more than 150,000 people living together inside and nearby. It covers 3 provinces, and also within the landscape, we have 2 protected areas. It's called non-hunting area. I noticed that Ili shared some of the area yesterday and this morning, but at least to give you some kind of snapshot about the context for those who just joined in. So why we talk about community engagement in the fire management? Because the peat itself or the peatland itself offer a number of resources for the local livelihood. When you talk about sources of local livelihood, it's not only about sources for income generation. It's a place to live, it's a place for social gathering, it's a place to maintain their identity. So, well, fishery products that could be made, but there are many more in terms of getting the resources for additional income or maintain their traditional practices, and also in terms of using the peat swamp or landscape for learning purposes. Well, as I said earlier, within this landscape, there are many land use that belong to different land categories. Some of them under the National Park Acts, and some of them under the Wildlife Acts. Many of them still under the Forest Reserve law, and still some of them still under the private land ownership and land allocation title. So meaning there are a number of interests within the common landscape, But how can we prevent the conflict and how can we manage the conflict into the positive result without community engagement? It also brings in the partnership and collaboration because we believe in potential of people. Different stakeholders within the landscape have opportunities and potential to offer. So even though the local people, they do not have clear tenure and right to manage the resources, but they have a number of traditional knowledge, knowing about their resources. Compared with the government has law to enforce or implement. The private sector have other interests, but they have uh, abilities to invest in the area. Just to give some kind of snapshot, that's why we have to put all together. And at the same time, we need a long-term strategy and sustainability for the peatland management. So we cannot just to plant trees and then we expect the tree will grow in the next 5 years. Or we cannot expect that, okay, we improve the livelihood condition within the areas and we expect the small-scale enterprise will stay for the next 10 years. So we need to get their engagement in any intervention, including the decision making and also implementing any plan together. Well, I just give you some kind of ideas within the areas that we work with. It's a combination of different sectors. The key important is that how to bring in the sector to work together and support each other. So that's why I like to comment the title that you have, People for Peat, but I would say Peat for People, meaning I put the people as the center, and then how can we make use of the peat resources to maintain our human being. The approach that we use is the how to engage with the community in the area when you talk about fire management. I think it happened, I'm sure it happened in Indonesia and elsewhere as well. It's rarely to see the natural fire in our peatland. More or less, fire come from human. So how can you get local people involved in the fire management? In the project, we support voluntary forest fire network. The network are the representatives of the villages who get affected by the forest fire and who can make their or contribute to the forest fire management. So we cover like 44 villages together and then they send representative to join as the forest fire network. So they discuss about the fire issue. The plan that they discuss is not only about during the fire season. Before the fire season, for instance, like during this time is the rainy season, they plan how to mitigate the a chance of fire, and during the fire season, they discuss with the light agency how to protect or how to extinct the fire if it happened. And after the fire, they plan to rehabilitate or restore the burned area. So that is in the discussion with the villagers. The next approach we use, and I share with the discussion this morning, well, the young generation, many of them do not know enough about their peatland or peat resources. So how can we engage with the young generation? How can we get youth well, notice that youth has a lot of power using IT and technology. They have their own social media. They have their own language to communicate with their parents and their colleagues and friends. So how can we engage with them in peat sustainable forest in the sustainable peat management? So we work together with local school and we work together with the provincial education units, which is the responsible unit to take care of the school curriculum development. So we use Peat as the vehicle to learn more about those mandatory subjects like mathematics, chemistry, biology, physical education, and so on. So we don't want to teach the local school student to be more aware about the value of peatland yet, but more or less it's about touching and accessible to the peat land and be part of their daily life. So that's why we developed that kind of curriculum. And the experience that we have is that after they understand the peat, then they can associate with the value of the peat in terms of offering different sources of for the local livelihood, especially for their parents. So that help, and also the young generation, they form themselves as the environmental group to do the social media. Sometimes they do the Live group or send up the short video clips to share each other. It helped in terms of monitoring the uh, peat resource situation in the area. We also, as I said earlier, within the landscape we are working, the land category is quite complex, and the land tenure arrangement is quite complex. Some land belong to private, some land belong to the company, some land belong to different government agencies. So if we don't talk about integrated landscape strategy, it will be a nightmare because one department may take care only water, and one department may take care forest, one department may take care livelihood, one take care of the enterprise development, one take care about infrastructure and fishery and so on. If they don't talk to each other, it become sectoral approach, and then it end up is that nobody will take care of the peatland. I'm sure it happened in the Kalimantan in Indonesia as well. This is something that probably we like to learn from Indonesia. So we developed the integrated landscape strategy to bring in the opportunities for the communities to engage in. The strategy itself has gone through a consultation process. A number of people representing local organization, villagers join in and voice themselves what they perceive, how to do the integrated landscape management. Especially, we talk about how to do the water integrated management, peatland restoration, sustainable livelihood within peatland, how to make use of the learning mechanism within the peatland. Be aware that within the peatland there are so many local wisdom and traditional knowledge that we can build upon, and how to build upon the youth power and gender leadership within the landscape. So a number of local enterprise groups. So how can we bring those up into the landscape management implementation? Yeah, that is something that we have to build upon when you talk about community-based enterprise development. It's not only about income or additional income from handicraft, but how can they reinvest into their peatland management? For instance, like how to set up the peatland fund mechanisms together with the protected area in the specific area. So I'm sure Ajahn Tirsak can share more the mechanism that he has analyzed from his research on the co-management mechanism. So these are the mechanisms that we like to, actually we have found from the area and help in terms of engaging with local representatives. When I say local representative, that include the real local users, local leaders, and also local enterprise groups. Another mechanisms that we found the concept of community forestry. When I say concept of forestry community, I repeat, this is a concept and practice. It may not be legally recognized because I think I heard from Ely, she mentioned about the community forest in the area. There are 3 community forest areas in the landscape. Only one recognized by the law. The main reason is that one community forest, it sits under the Ministry of Interior, and another one, community forest, sit within the national park law. So yeah, for those who understand about the national park law in Thailand, national park do not recognize community forest practice in the protected area. The only one community forest recognized by the law is under the forest department. Yeah, but in fact, it happened in the area. And when I talk about community forestry, I'm not talking about the forest. I'm talking about the approach that bring in the social unities and also the processes, how to get the gender representative in the decision making and action. I just want to share, probably this is a last slide, probably sharing some kind of enabling factor in terms of engaging with local representatives. More or less, we need to address the issue about trust. So as I said earlier, if the land belongs to different departments, how can we ensure that we don't make confusion to local people? Because local people, they do not care which land belongs to which department, but they see only land in front of them. Yeah, but how can we bring the trust that the departments, agencies working together and then recognize their power to make or solve the problem and make things forward. The tenure arrangement need to be clear what they can do and what they cannot, and need to be upfront in the discussion and also in the integrated landscape management. So that is something, I'm not saying that we have to give the peatland 100% to the hand of the local people, but we can do some kind of zoning. So which zone it need to be very much restricted, and some zone that we can compromise by having co-management mechanism, and some zone that we should allow the local people to take care for their own benefit. That provide the incentive for them to take care of the peat swamp area. Then we talk about capacities. I'm sure when you talk about the peat resources, the source of livelihood is quite limited. Yeah, especially it rely on the waters, the level of waters, and also somehow in the Khon Kreng landscape we are working, not many species can grow, only Melaleuca. So how can we bring in the technologies to let the local people gain more benefit? Well, we already identified some potential products like uh, peat, uh, peat swamp honey, or ecotourism, or bird watching, or the handicraft from the water weed. So can we bring in the technologies that add values addition, and then linking with the private companies to set up the branding and then sell those products to and then they set up the mechanism for refinance to the peat swamp management. The last point, oh, sorry, this is the point that I like to mention, the mechanism to coordination. I'm not saying that, okay, well, only among the government agency, but need to bring in all the development agency, including NGO, civil society, to sit in the mechanism to ensure that everyone walking in the same flow, in the same direction, and then moving forward. The mechanism for monitoring and evaluation need to be in place, but probably somebody needs to take the lead to ensure that happen. So with that, I'd like to end up my sharing, and I'd like to repeat that the experience that we have in the peatland only from the Khon Kreng landscape. And I have to admit that I'm not the peatland management expert. I am community-based natural resource management expert per se. So I focus more on the social, even my background is forestry, but my last 40 years of experience working on the community processes, how to get them involved in the natural resource management. Joe.
Thank you so much for your powerful message, Mr. Ranakan. I think that was very, very nicely put by about Peat for people, empowering people and local communities at peatlands by giving them good livelihoods that they can rely on together with the peatland to be able to be that stewards of the peatland. After all, they are the ones that are most affected by what happens in the peatland living there. So really, thank you for that message, Mr. Ranakan. So I don't see any action in the chat box so far. So if you have any questions for Mr. Ranakan that you'd like to direct to him, please feel free to use the chat box. As for now, let's move on to our next speaker. Our next speaker is Dr. Chetsak Kuaraksa from Thaksin University. I will read his short profile here. Dr. Chertsak has a degree in environmental sciences, majoring in forest ecology, and is an expert in forest restoration. He worked as a manager at the Forest Restoration Research Unit, or FORU, at Chiang Mai University for 10 years before moving back to his hometown in Patalong province in southern Thailand. He has been working as a lecturer at the Patalong campus of Thaksin University for the past 6 years and has been inspired to conduct research on sustainable peatland management in Quang Kring Peat Swamp Forest. Further, Dr. Chertsak is the secretary of the recently established Talenoi Wetland Foundation, or TWF, which aims to conduct research on wetland and peatland ecology and to share knowledge on such topics to community members to improve their understanding of and for conservation. For those of you who have been part of our conference of parties in the last 2 days, I think you know how much in demand Dr. Chertsak's comments are and how much he has to offer. So without further ado, we all look forward to hearing from you, Dr. Chertsak. The floor is yours. You have 20 minutes. Feel free to take it from here. If you would like us to share the slides for you, we can, or you can do it yourself.
Hello, thank you very much. Oh, so can I share my screen?
Yes, you can. Oh.
Okay. Good morning. Oh, sorry. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Chertsak Keraksa. I am a lecturer in Faculty of Technology and Community Development, Thaksin University in Patalong campus. And also now I am the secretary of the TWF, or Talenoi Wetland Foundation, which is a newly foundation in Thailand who work on the wetlands. So for the presentation today, I will present on the livelihoods in Talenoi non-hunting peatland area. So Talenoi non-hunting area is a part of the Greater Songkhla Lake Basin. That is the largest lagoon lakes in Thailand. And Talenoi is the first non-hunting area of Thailand, an area of about 40,700 hectares, covering in 3 provinces, including Nakhon Si Thammarat, Patalong, and Songkhla province. And also, this area is one of the largest natural fresh waters in Southeast Asia. That's well-known tourist destinations, which more than 200,000 tourists visit to Talenoi every year. And also there are 3 main ecological systems in Talenoi's non-hunting area, which including the peat swamp forest, and this is a cradlands, and the last one is the fresh water pond. This is 3 main ecosystems in here. So this is I will show you the timeline for the utilizing of Talenoi non-hunting areas. Normally it can be separated in 3 periods. In the dark green, it's called the clean forest before the 1962s. And the second one is called the Port Harriet, it means the port after the big storm which occur in this area, and now we call the period of the commercial agriculture. Before the 1962s, there was a lot of use of timber in the peatlands, aquatic animals, wildlife, and the non-timber forest products. That is very, very popular at that time. However, during the post-Harriet tropical storm, the aquatic animals were harvested most. And during this time, the non-hunting areas had been established. So the hunting of wildlife, and the timbers at reduces. But the non-forest timber products and rice planting was still high. During the commercial agriculture from 1997 until the present, oil palm plantation and rubber plantation were introduced into the area. And also the tourist industry start to bring a lot of income to the communities, which also affect the use of graduate or the lepidotanias. And for the past 10 years, we found that the rice field and the peat swamp forest had been reduced and replaced by the oil palm plantation, which cover about within 10 years, the oil palm plantation increased about 10,000 hectares, 10,100 hectares. The yellows, I will show you, the yellows, it means the rice field, and the dark green, it means the peat swamp forest. And the purple represent the oil palm plantation. And you can see it changed a lot within 10 years, everything it changed. So for the presentation today, I am going to talk about the peat swamp forest in Thailand only. It means this is the area of Thailand non-hunting area, and this is on the upper part. This is it called the Bolaw non-hunting area. So it separates into organization will take care of the forest. The peat swamp forest normally is cover about 28 hectares, which is divided into many patches. You can have a look. So I think this is important if we want to restore the forest. So we have to connect or to make the corridors, because of it's separate in many small patch. So, and I also choose to present 3 important swamp forest patches. This is it called the Kwan Kreng peat swamp forest, and the second forest is the Kwan Ki Sian peat swamp forest, and also the Krong Yuan peat swamp forest. Kwan Kreng Peat Swarm Forest is a large secondary, very large secondary swarm forest where the forest fires occur yearly. So and underground, under the canopy of this area is dominated by the Melauca or the paper bark tree, and under the canopy underground is dominated by the Lepironia or the crajut. And this area is the biggest source of crajut of the world, Thailand, I think, because of the crajut in here is high quality and very popular for the on crajut weaving products. And also in this area, about half of the turtle household in Kreng earn their living from crajut weavings, which earning about 9,000 baht per month. Products that are made in the community are basics, just as the mat or the basket. So it, from our resort, the weighting of raw graduates alone is worth about 60 million baht a year. But it's quite interesting because of the graduate product for export was worth about 200,000 million baht. So this is a cap of the benefit that the local community and the another organization or get from the graduate. And in here, it had a very interesting on sustainability use of graduate. So here is the villagers are wetting graduates wisely. For example, this is normally the villagers are wet graduate by cutting the stalk with a knife because they could do the work faster, getting more materials, which means more income as well. However, during the rainy season, the villager will not harvest graduate by cutting them, but they will, uproot graduate by pulling with hand. This way, the graduates will not die. And this is an example of the local wisdom, I think, on how to make use and maintain graduate sustainabilities. And the another examples in the dark green colors and in the green color here show the area of graduate that have been taken care by the villagers. Normally, the village rule is that each household will be taking care of graduate in their own backyards. It's about 400 meters from their backyards. So this means that it's how it's responsible for digging and making fire barriers around graduate in their backyards. So that's the forest fire or the wildfire cannot harm their plants. I think this is a good example of the local wisdom in this area. And the next peat swarm forest which I want to show is called the Kwan Ki Sian. This is a first Ramsar site of Thailand because it's important nesting site for especially for the water birds, both migratory and non-migratory species. at least about 200 of water bird species. You this peat swarm forest look like that, the habitat and breedings. And the main source of this piece of the Quanquisian peat swarm forest is the I mean the main source of the livelihoods is the cotton crushing and the non forest timber product. Quanquisian is known for the cotton rank and the non timber forest products. The buffalo racing has been practiced in here for more than 100 years, and they are raised freely in the wild for about 9 months. Buffalo have become an important part of the peat swamp ecosystem because it did the biggest animal in the peat swamp forest, which replaced the pygmy elephant, born pygmy elephant with extirpation from this area about 100 years ago. The buffalo make a micro habitats. For example, this is the waterways. Because when the buffalo walks, it can make look like a small canal like this, and it's all of the peat swamp forest. This is good for the ecosystem because of this. It look like the look like the wet fabric. Yeah, it's and makes the peatland had a lot of moist and waters in everywhere. And also this is the example. This is a wallow pools. This is very interesting too, and it's around also in the peat swamp forest as well. It can, this the wallow pool like that is very important, especially in the dry season. Very important for many animals, the fish, and also the wildlife protections as well. And also the buffalo racing is the main source of the farmer income, because the buffalo are raised freely, so the farmer have a time to do another thing, such as the fisheries, rice farming, and tourism. And now we are currently preparing a proposal on the buffalo agro ecosystem to be designed at the globally important agriculture heritage system, or RGS, with FAO, because it looks like the ecological friendly agriculture in the peat swamp forest. And apart from that, this is the Ramsar site, which not dominated only by the Melauca, but it mixed with many tree species. So there are lots of non-timber products, such as the young shoot of fern, the white mushroom, the red ant egg, or the water lilies. And this is the very important products from the peat swamp forest that Piranakon mentioned before. This is the honeybees. from the peat swarm forest, which is very expensive. It's about 600 per one bottoms. That's a good income for the villagers. And this is I want to show all of you the sample of the local wisdoms in collecting the young, it's called the paper wasps. Normally when the people harvest the paper wasps, they will burn the nest, which means all of the mother wasp will all die. But for the villager here, they have created a new way to collect the wasps without having to kill the mother wasps. So they could fry and can build a new nest, a new nest somewhere else. A special suit is invented by the villagers for their own safety when they're collecting young the paper wasps. And the last peat swarm forest which I want to introduce is Krong Yuan peat swarm forest. The Krong Yuan peat swarm forest is famous for the fishery and ecotourism because the area is connected to the rivers and the lake. This is the Songkra Lake, which the water in here is brackish waters. So fish are diverse in this area. This is for example. And here, this is the local wisdom in fisheries. These are, we call the giant fishing nets or yaws. It's quite interesting because the number of yaw or the giant fishing in this area is limited by the number of local families that have long been living in the area. This is to control the overuse of natural resources. And besides, fish shelters are being built around the peat swarm forest to serve as a netting spawning ground for the young fish. And also, this is a lot of tourists into the areas, especially about the birds watching, canoeing, sightseeing are popular, and is creating extra income for villagers. Normally, for one round trip for the boat driver by the local people, it takes about 2 hours. It means they can get about 1,200 baht. That's it, a very good income today. And they did a superstar for birds watching, for the bird watchers. This is the buffy fish owl. And also the sunbirds, many kinds of sunbird here, and the others. So that's I want to show you because of each type of the peat swarm forest has its own unique characteristics. That's why the administration of each place should also be done differently, such as their own strategic management plan. If you want to gain the sustainabilities. Thank you very much. Also, I have to say thank you, Ellie, for inviting me. Thank you, UNDP, RECOP, ONEP, Jeff, and also thank you everyone for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chetsak, for your very interesting talk. So I've been monitoring the chat and I see that there's a lot of activity, a lot of questions for Mr. Ranakon. that he has already answered in the chat. So if you've missed out on those, please feel free to read his responses in the chat box. We've entered our Q&A session for now. And since Mr. Ranakon's already answering the questions directed to him in the chat box, I will go on and direct the first question we have for Dr. Chetsak from Jerome Montemayor. So he asked, please elaborate on the building corridors of peatlands. How were you able to do this in Thailand? So Dr. Chetsak, would you like to answer that?
Sorry, can you repeat the question again?
It goes, Ajahn Chetsak, please elaborate on the building corridors of peatlands. How were you able to do this in Thailand? It was referring to the corridors in your slides to connect the peatlands, the patches of peatlands.
I think to make the corridor is very important now, because the peat swarm forest is separate or fragmentation into the small parts. So that's why I quite interesting. So if we want to find the area to restore, I will recommend is one thing is how to connect between the patch or the between patch together. This is my recommend. But now I think we don't know where to restore the wetland, and also we lack of knowledge on the framework tree species, which is good for restore the peat swarm, because in east peat swarm that I show our viewers have a different ecosystem. So I think the basic scientific data such as the phenology of the tree, the tree species, that's very important first, and then we can select the good framework species that can restore and where to restore. Thank you.
Thank you for that response, Dr. Chetsak. I am a big fan of Foru's work as well as your work. So yes, I suppose, yes, we have to be smart in prioritizing areas to restore in peatlands that will have maximum impact for the ecology of the area. And restoring such corridors would be very impactful for wildlife living around the area to be able to move between forest patches to reduce genetic erosion. So another question for Dr. Chetsak is by A. Noyara R. from Te Juhana Foundation. Noyara is asking, I'm wondering if you can tell us how is the market for peat products such as krajut? Do you need to establish the supply chain from scratch for the people there? Dr. Chetsak, would you like to respond?
We have not done yet, but we have a plan to help the local community on the marketing. We call the green economy projects that we want to go and help the local community to develop their products, and and then we want to help them on to make look like a green label or something like that. But the main thing is we are focusing on green economy in their communities. So that is the plan which we will do in the future. But now the marketing of of the market of the grassroots product is it depends on the number of the tourists, especially in this time. It's not a good time for selling the product because the problem from COVID-19 set bill. But now I think the product of grassroots is export to many countries of the world. So that is a good thing but the benefit is not for the local communities, right? Now most of the benefit is go to the private sectors who had a knowledge on product development and on the marketing as well. So we have to help the local people on especially about the marketing. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Yes, it's globally, we're all on lockdown, more or less. Everyone's not been able to travel. So yeah, we do need to look for new ways to help them market their products. Okay, thank you for that. So now, before Mr. Ranakon leaves the meeting, we would like to invite you also to perhaps give some final comments if you would like to, based on the responses you've been giving in the chat, or anything else you'd like to say. Mr. Ranakon, would you like to give us a few comments before you leave?
Thanks, Joe. I think most of the questions that I tried to respond in the chat box. Thanks, Jerome. Well, it has been a while that we haven't met each other, so hope you are doing okay, Jerome. And then the question is about the PES and also incentive for the peat swamp conservation or management. Similar to what Ajahn Chersak just mentioned, I think, well, at the moment, as I mentioned earlier, even though there are a number of community-based enterprise groups, but they're still lacking in terms of make use of the technologies. One, to develop their own products. So we need some help from the private sector to come with their a business mindset to train them how to do the product design, how to strengthen the marketing mechanisms using the ITs and then selling broadly. As Dr. Chersak mentioned, it used to be the physical market, but can we do it online selling? Can we get the private sector help? I assume that UNDP is in the discussion with some Thai-based company helping for the online marketing. So that is something that we need private sector to go in and then take a quick look. As I said earlier in the previous discussion this morning, if we look at the supply chains, there are many gaps and we need support from the private sector. And I would avoid getting only the money through the CSR because that only on the occasional basis. If they have money, then they spend, but if they don't have money, they don't spend. I would like to see the long-term private community partnership and build a business plan together. So that is something that we are looking forward. There are many potential products like Rajut that Dr. Chersak mentioned, the community-based tourism that is somehow, how can we develop the tourism programs that attract domestic tourists. At the moment, country lockdown, we need to aim for the domestic tourists. So how can we aim for the domestic to pay more money but enjoy the nature? And how can we bring in different technologies to sell this kind of intervention? So one more thing that I forgot to mention, under the project, we help the local people to reflect on the local wisdom and local knowledge. I'm glad that Jerome mentions about the IP and how can we recognize the traditional practices. So we have found a number of local wisdom related to the peat swamp conservation. We have collected and then we asked the local people to be our key speaker or resource people. We developed three community-based learning sites or learning centers. And we asked the local wisdom speakers or eligible, knowledgeable to be tour guide and explain about the peat swamp conservation. So we like to take we like to build the ownership to the local communities, and that help in terms of speed up the understanding about peat swamp, especially among the public citizen, especially for those who live in the city, understand more what the peatland could offer. So that similar to what Dr. Chesak mentioned, a number of people who live around the peatland, they do not know much about their own peatland. So that is the approach that we use, build upon the traditional practices, let them voice themselves, let them educate other public people, and then get more support from the public people. So I just want to mention that in my presentation. Joe, I have to apologize, and also I enjoy the discussion, and also I'm happy to take more question after. I'm sure, Joe, you can share my email address in screen or somewhere, and I'm happy to take more questions. And also, I like to discuss with some of you who are interested to learn more about the Khuon Kreng landscape after the webinar. But I have to go and enjoy the CBA 14 with RIAD in the next few minutes. I really enjoy. Thank you very much for these opportunities here to allow us to share experience. And I'm sure we will cross paths to each other at some point when we talk about the sustainable peatland management. Joe.
Thank you, Mr. Ranakon, for your insightful remarks. So there's an invitation by Jerome for Dr. Jetsak and also Mr. Ranakon to connect about through the Fair Trade Alliance of Thailand to either market krajut or other indigenous products from peatlands or online and virtual marketplaces that are emerging. So thank you so much for all those comments. We really appreciate it. It's really very valuable to us who are trying to learn something here. Let me see if there's anything in the chat box. There is a question from Corazon Macaventa, but I'm not sure who it's directed to, but seeing that Mr. Ranakon will be leaving, I think it will be Dr. Chetsak. It goes, sir, how did you deal with land use conflict in peatland management? The peatland areas having been released as alienable and disposable land. This is in reference to a Filipino case where the case of the Leyte Sabah Basin peatlands have gone through similar struggles. So if Dr. Chesat, you'd like to offer some insights on this Corazon's question here, would you like to respond?
Oh, sorry, Joe, because it's hard rain. I cannot hear. Can you repeat again?
Okay. Corazon asked, how did we deal with land use conflicts in peatland management when the peatland areas have been released as alienable and disposable land? Dr. Chensap, could you hear me?
So first thing I think about the law, we have to change. We have now today we have the nation policies, especially for only for the peat swamp forest. That I think we should make a policy in Thailand to take care of the peat swamp forest. And the second thing is to reduce the conflicts between the local communities and the conservation area or the use of the peatland. I think we have to talk about the co-management, and we have to do more research of how look like where is the buffer zone, how to manage and how to share the benefit. That is very important. That is two things that I want to recommend, and also the public participations. I think it's very important, especially to develop, to improve or to the development the local researcher in this warm forest or something like that. That maybe helps. Sorry, because it's hard rain and a lot of lighting in here.
Okay, got it. Thank you for that. Those recommendations, Dr. Chetzak. Indeed, proposing co-management of peat swamp forests and co-benefit sharing. Those are things that are new concepts, not so new anymore, but really things that our landscapes should be moving towards if we really want to maximize the strengths of non-state actors like local communities, villages, researchers, and also other non-state actors like private sectors on the ground. Because there's no single party that could take all these responsibilities and execute them themselves. So you're very right in saying that there should be more provisions made for these kinds of mechanisms to take place on the ground. If there's anyone who would like to ask more questions or make comments, feel free to use the raise hand button that you can find if you press on the participants button. There will be a raise hand button there that you can use to raise your hand if you have a question or a comment to make. In the meantime, there hasn't been any other questions in the chat box. Let me see. There is okay, Connie's hand is up. So Connie, would you like to make a comment or ask a question?
Yes, hi. Yep, thanks, Joe. Question to Dr. Chetzak. I know you mentioned that with, increasing ecotourism, that, people, the local people there are having more opportunities to earn, alternative sources of income. So, the example you showed with the kayaking. I wanted to know, how much of it do they actually get to keep? Because if they are employed by, let's say, some company above them, maybe they only get a small percentage. And have you done any, let's say, revenue trend analysis? Because a couple of years ago, I was actually down there at Telenoi and Songkla Lake. And I noticed, compared to my first visit 5 years ago, that there are now so many new hotels coming up there. And the difference was, my first visit, I dealt directly with the hotel, and it seemed to be a local owner. For my second visit, it was the same hotel, but it seemed to now belong to some kind of a larger holding group or company. So I'm wondering, even with all this kind of development, how much or what percentage is it sufficient that's actually getting back for the local people? Thank you.
Dr. Chetzak, would you like to respond?
Yes. Thank you, Connie. I want to show you the best practice on the ecotourism management in Khong Yuan Peat Swamp Forest. Do you know the wetland camp? Wetland camp is the private company which is the work on the first ecotourism in that area. So and how the wetland camp manage, they involve all of the fishermen come to help, but look like the rotations on, look like the boat they have a rotations. All of the fishermen around in the communities can come to take the tourists in each trip. It means all of the fishermen can come and help and share the benefit from the tourist. It's called the rotation. This is the rotation system. This is very fair for the local community, and everybody come to help and to protect this area because this area is make a good income for them as well. And also he had look like a training on for the boat driver or for the guy who which take the tourist into the Peat swamp, how to take care, and this is, I think this is the good best practice that we can share the benefits to the local communities. That's it. Thank you. A lot of like.
Sounds like interesting weather. Thank you, Dr. Chetsak. Actually, I have a question, Dr. Chetsak, about the Community Forest Act that was recently enforced in Thailand. So since the Community Forest Act has been passed, do you know if there has been many community forests that have been recognized legally now, or has it just only started? Do you know like how many community forests have been recognized as of now? Just a rough estimate, maybe?
Before the new law of the community forest, it had in Talenoi Nananting area, it had about, or in Kwan Kreng landscape, it had about 27 community forests. But the problem is when the new law of the community forest use it. Now the number of the community forest is decreasing because of it look like illegal or something like that, and it is an important point. In the past, it had a community forest, but after the law of the community forest is using it, the number of community forests is decreasing. So this is the situation in the area now, Joe.
Wow, that's a very interesting insight on the ground. So does that mean that community members at national parks who used to be able to access community forests now cannot go inside and use them anymore?
Yes, because it look like the buffer zone, you know. Normally the government should, I think they should have a policy to work, look like a co-management on the land, which with the local people use, and I think maybe good example, right? We can solve the problem, but now because of the enforcement of the law, so the local people cannot access to that area or cannot access to management. They had one of the community forest, it called Somdet. It's had a very good practice on water level control in the Peat swamp forest. That is a very good example. I think that it can adapt to another Peat swamp forest as well. But now they cannot I'm not sure now the status of the community forest is inside the national park or not. This is the situation now, Joe.
Wow, thank you for that information. That is quite concerning. Just to follow up, do you know, Dr. Chetsak, if the government intends to change the situation or make it so that good practices like that in some maybe not recognized community forests will have a chance to continue operating? Are there plans by the government that have been announced saying they want to increase the number of community forests in protected areas? Or how is it moving forward?
Now the national park had new laws, but it's it called them the mother law, but the another law which under control by the mother law is not finished. But this is a good the public participation is increasing on the new law. So I think we will have a good future on the co-management in conservation areas. So.
Thank you for that, Dr. Chetsak. That sounds promising. I hope there will be improvements made in the near future for community forests and peat communities in Thailand. Okay, so we've gone through quite a few discussions now. Is there anyone else who would like to make a comment or ask a question? I see Ruben has asked a question in the chat box. Well, since it's only Dr. Chetsak left, I think it will be for you. What agencies are responsible for the water management in the buffer zone? Is it still Department of Irrigation? And is LDD the main department involved for management in the buffer zones? Dr. Chetsak? Are you there, Dr. Chetsak?
Yes, I am. Now in the non-Nantang area, we have it called the PAC, the Protected Area Committee. That is very important because of the committee of PAC. It comes from many stakeholders. I think that's it. Maybe the good community that can help to manage or to make a strategic plan for the buffer zones utilization or something like this. I recommend the PAC committees, but for the GMC or the choice management committees, they are focusing only I think only the water management, but the PAC committees I think it's better on co-management in the buffer zone. So.
I see, but so is it still the Department of Irrigation and LDD that are the main departments that are handling water management in buffer zones? Or are more communities allowed, or the committees are allowed to have more direct involvement?
Oh, okay, it's funny story. In the GMC is in the GMC committees had no the forester or the conservation areas to be at the committee in that the GMC committee. That is surprising, right? Because most of the area is under control by the foresters, but the forester is not the committee. This is the real situation now. And for the PAC committees, it include the staff from the irrigation staff as well. It means the irrigation staff is one of the committee of the PAC. Yes, and they know how, and they can help to on the idea on water management in that area as well.
I see. That is strange about the JMC not having a forester. Is there a reason why there's no forester in the JMC committee?
This is I recommend in my research as well. The forest is very important, but I don't know why the structure of the committees had no the staff from the foresters. Because I recommend to the government already.
I see. I hope your recommendations will be taken seriously. Also, Ruben continued to ask Dr. Chetsak whether there is a difference between buffer areas and development zones. What are the main differences for buffer areas and development zones? Dr. Chetsak.
I think for development zone, it's mean the local people and the governments can be developed together in especially on the natural resource utilization. But buffer zone, I think, is because of the peat swarm forest is very sensitive. So we should have some buffer zones that to separate between the local people and the peat swarm forest. So I think that is the difference between the two words. But now many people talk about the zonings as well. The zonings, buffer zone and development areas. But I think it's very difficult to separate on the three words. But this is my understanding. Is buffer zone is used for protects, especially for the sensitive area for the peat swarm forest like that. But the development zone, this is it means the local people and the government it can use that especially on the natural resource utilization, something like that too.
Okay. Yeah, I completely agree that buffer zones are important to protect very sensitive peat swarm ecosystems. Is there a regulation on how long the buffer zone should be? Like, is it like 10 meters, or is there some regulation for it, or is it determined by like the Joint Management Committee? Do you know, Dr. Jitsa?
I think with the committee mechanism is very important to discuss it, especially I think the institutions like the academic institutions on all the stakeholders have to talk together about how big and proud the buffer. I think that the committee mechanism is very important.
Okay, thank you for that, Dr. Chetsak, and thank you for taking so many questions. You've been really helpful and cooperative. I see Connie's hand is still raised in the box. Do you have something to add, or is this from earlier?
No, I think you have to unraise my hand.
Right. Okay. Sorry, I'm not one of the hosts, so I cannot unraise you. So.
Oh, okay,
Yes,
that's all right.
host.
Then I don't have anything to add.
All right. All right. That's cool. All right. If there are no other questions, I don't see any more questions in the chat box or any more hands raised, then we would like to conclude the session. Thank you so much, Dr. Chetsak, for your patience in answering so many questions, because you're the only one left. Very, very interesting sessions, both the talks from very distinguished figures. So just want to thank you all once again for taking time to be here to give these talks to us. Unfortunately, Mr. Ronacon has had to go to another meeting earlier. So without further ado, I think I'll just pass this time back to Tommy so you could conclude the session properly. The floor is yours, Tommy.
Thank you, Joe. I thank you also, Dr. Chetsak, for all the important insights that have been provided to people for Peat for this today's seminars, starting from yesterday's conference of parties and until these webinars. And also, I believe these insights can also be beneficial also for other stakeholders that attending these webinars. And just to remind everyone to follow People for Peat in our social media, there will be other and more webinars to come because we are still have numbers of countries to cover in our discussion. So bear in mind that we'll be having also a webinar on peatland management in Myanmar on October 8th. So any information on this will be shared in our social media. Finally, I do hope that everyone joined the webinars, and I think I'm expecting to see you again very soon in our next webinar. Thank you for attending these seminars, and see you very soon.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, people.